Two great stories to squeeze in today, so let's not waste time. The local newspaper in Saranac Lake that's bucking the trend and printing its own paper still. And a phone to the universe in a chilly border town where you can talk to the people you've lost. Those are today's stories of the day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Clarkson University, offering over 95 programs of study with campuses in the Hudson Valley, Central, and Northern New York. More at clarkson.edu.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Friday, December 27th. The crisis of local journalism has hit nearly every newspaper in the country hard, with layoffs in the newsroom and cuts to whole sections of the paper. Many are also outsourcing where the paper is printed. But in the Adirondacks, the Tri-Lakes historic daily newspaper is holding strong. NCPR intern Zach Jaworski reports.
It's becoming harder to find local newspapers that are still printed in the communities they report on. But the Adirondack Daily Enterprise in Saranac Lake is still printed right at home.
Yeah, there's definitely a huge sense of pride with it.
Aaron Marbone is a senior reporter for the Enterprise.
It's not something essential for journalism, but it adds a lot to journalism.
Last year, on the other side of New York State, the Buffalo News decided to outsource its printing to Cleveland, Ohio, a city about 3 hours away. Dozens more make the same choice each year to cut printing costs. Marbone says keeping presses in Saranac Lake is a tradition of sorts.
Having the press right here, finishing up the paper, and then hearing the presses kick on, it's a great feeling.
He's working on stories that don't affect a lot of people. A small road closure due to an accident and a children's musical. But to Saranac Lake, those are really important. When Marbone's done writing, he signals his newsroom colleague, who lifts a bike horn from her desk. Someone else puts their hands to their mouth and produces a loon call. Those noises let Jesse Phelan, who's been a pressman at the paper for more than 16 years, know the paper is ready to print.
All right, so everything we do here starts with paper.
Today, Phelan's walking me through the printing process, which starts out on a modern computer.
All right, so we are getting the files from our FTP site.
But after that, it doesn't look much different than it did 50 years ago.
You have to think of it in a different sense of you're in a physical media format. Actually, analog is a better term.
The massive room we're in smells like hot oil mixed with pine, the type of tree the paper is made from. We're looking at about 50 feet of paper, bridging 6 refrigerator-sized printers. It looks kind of like a paper conveyor belt. These presses were made in the 1970s, and Phelan says they require a more hands-on approach than modern ones, which also comes with a bit more responsibility.
Because you're running a machine that if you make one wrong move and don't react quickly enough, you could destroy it in seconds.
Phelan wraps print rollers with aluminum templates of today's paper.
Now we apply the rest of the levers. Ink levers, ink feeds, compression lever. Sometimes it takes a little finesse to get this to line up. There we go.
And through that process, which looks more like a choreographed dance than a skilled trade, the Adirondack Daily Enterprise is all set to print.
And then I'm going to bring it up to full speed. You're going to hear it for the first time.
One of the first people to read this edition, Dawn Reuter, a bartender at the nearby Rusty Nail.
Everyone loves local news. Everyone that works at the paper knows everyone in town, so it's kind of a nice local community.
She says it wouldn't be the same if it was printed elsewhere.
Everyone is wonderful at the paper, and the town enjoys having a local paper. It's something that people always grab. I pass it around every day at the bar.
As presses across the country continue to close, the Adirondack Daily Enterprise is proud to uphold a tradition, right here in the North Country. For North Country Public Radio, I'm Zach Jaworski in Saranac Lake.
There's a saying that grief is love with nowhere to go. And that's a hard thing to carry, especially during the holidays. This year, a business owner and elected official in northern Clinton County set up what's known as a wind phone. Its purpose is to give people a place to express their grief by talking to the loved ones they've lost out loud. Kara Chapman reports.
Janet McFetridge says the act of dialing a rotary phone really takes her back.
You're at church and you're calling for a ride home, so you dial that number, and I'll bet almost all of us remember those landline numbers. Very quickly comes back, and there's just that connection to the past, I guess.
This particular rotary phone is special. For one, it's outside, mounted to a small wooden telephone booth on Main Street in the tiny border town of Champlain. And when you pick it up, it doesn't have a dial tone. That's because it's not connected to any telephone lines or networks. It's called a wind phone. The idea is that you pick it up, dial a number if you want, and talk to a loved one who has died, out loud. McFetridge is the mayor of Champlain and owner of Red Canoe Coffee and Books next door. About a dozen people gathered for a dedication ceremony last summer. McFetridge told them the wind phone is available to all those coping with grief.
Each of us will experience the complex emotions that come with the loss of a loved one. And this phone, this old-fashioned wall phone rotary dial, will give you an opportunity to say what you hold in your hearts and to send your message off into the wind.
McFetridge says the first wind phone was created by a garden designer in Japan. He set up an unconnected telephone booth so he could talk to his cousin who had died. It's since received tens of thousands of visitors and inspired replicas all over the world. Amanda Mitchell is a bereavement coordinator and social worker with Hospice of the North Country. She says there's no right or wrong way to grieve, and she encourages people to try different things to see what works best for them. That includes talking to their loved ones out loud.
Talking to one who has passed on can bring us comfort and at times help us feel connections to them. It is a way to express everything we are feeling without dealing with outside opinions from others. Being able to express yourself when no one is around can be therapeutic. And even though your loved one isn't physically there, talking to them can help fill that void.
Mitchell says it's okay to be honest, even if you're feeling anger or guilt. She says talking into the wind phone is a good way to release those pent-up emotions.
It's easier to talk on the phone than to an empty room or even a headstone. Think of it like verbally journaling, except this way you don't run the risk of someone finding your book and reading your private thoughts.
Michelle Toloski gave the wind phone a go after the ceremony. She says she talked to her parents.
I just said, I still miss you and your earthly presence. That's what I said.
Mm-hmm.
So.
What were they like?
They were really good parents. My dad was from the Bahamas, and so that's my love of water and the ocean, and everything that was great about nature, I learned from him. And my mom was from Ohio, and she was a wonderful woman who worked her fingers to the bones, and she gave me my spunk.
Another woman, Carmen, said the wind phone brings things full circle for her. She and her late husband lived across the state from each other when they first met. That meant they spent a lot of time on the phone.
And we built a life for quite a while on a phone. And so by the time we came together as husband and wife and stuff like that, we really knew each other. It wasn't like this on the cuff, know each other. I mean, we really knew each other. So this phone speaks volumes for me.
And it's speaking to others, too. McFetridge says since the ceremony, people have stopped into her cafe after using the wind phone to thank her for putting it up. She says sometimes they have tears in their eyes, and she tells them that's okay.
You never know. You never know with grief in particular, how much you're holding it in and how much you aren't until you start to let a little bit out.
And the loss of a loved one can hit especially hard during the holidays. McFetridge says grief never really gets easier, and we're unknowingly surrounded by people dealing with it all the time.
But I think the wind phone allows you to just release that in some privacy, and it does allow you to say, hey, I'm hurting and I want to talk to you, and I'm here and I'm okay.
McFetridge says she hopes having the wind phone out where everyone can see it also puts grief out in the open.
I do hope that people feel comfortable to say, hey, I need this right now. And there's no stigma in stopping and sitting in this chair making a phone call.
The Champlain Village Wind Phone is open to the public 24/7 year-round. You can find it on Main Street next door to Red Canoe Coffee and Books. Kara Chapman, North Country Public Radio, Champlain.
More news all the time at ncpr.org. Music today by Lost in Beijing of Keane and Evan Veenstra of Gananoque, Ontario. Have a super weekend. I'm David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.